I sat in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty mug of coffee I'd been holding for too long. The cold, dark liquid seemed like a reflection of everything that had gone wrong. My mind couldn't quite catch up with what was happening. It was happening too fast, and I couldn't make sense of it. She was leaving. After 18 years, my wife, Laura, had packed her bags and was walking out the door. She'd been talking about needing space for weeks, but I never thought it would actually come to this. I looked over at our daughter, Sophie, who was standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, like she didn't know if she should be crying, or if she was supposed to just stay quiet. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. Laura had been giving her some speech about how things would be different now, but I wasn't listening to that. Not with the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Sophie," Laura said, her voice soft but steady. The kind of calm she used when she wanted to seem in control. "You'll stay with me some weekends, okay? You'll get to see your dad too. It'll be okay, sweetheart." Sophie barely nodded, her face unreadable, but I saw the flicker of something in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. "Dad, I'm not going," Sophie finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm staying here." I blinked, shocked. Laura shot me a look, the kind that said we both knew this wasn't her decision, but neither of us knew how to fix it. Laura grabbed her bag and started to walk toward the door, but I didn't follow. Instead, I sat there, feeling the room shrink around me. Every word from Laura sounded like it came from a million miles away. "I'll figure this out," I said, more to myself than to anyone. I felt like I was trying to hold onto something that was already slipping through my fingers. "We'll figure it out." But how do you even begin to figure out something like this? I didn't know. All I could do was look at Sophie, who had just been handed the broken pieces of her life and was staring at me like she didn't know what to do with them either. "You okay?" I asked, and she just shrugged. "Yeah," she said quietly, but her voice told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't okay. Neither of us were. As Laura walked out the door, I could hear Sophie shift behind me, moving closer. But she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I could feel it, this weight settling between us, one that I wasn't sure how to shake. I let out a breath, wiped my hand across my face, and made a decision then and there. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to yell. What was done was done. I needed to focus on Sophie, on the future. I couldn't let myself fall apart. We'd handle it, somehow. The silence in the house was deafening. But it wasn't the kind of silence that felt peaceful. It felt like the calm before something worse. The house felt smaller with every step I took. After Laura left, it was like the walls were closing in. And it only got worse the day I walked into the lawyer's office. It wasn't a fancy place. Just a small, sterile space with beige walls and too many books. The lawyer, Richard Pierce, was a middle-aged guy who looked like he spent his weekends fixing up his house and mowing the lawn. His voice was calm, measured, but there was something in his eyes that told me he'd seen worse. "We need to act fast," he said, after I explained the situation. "Given your daughter's clear rejection of her mother, there's a good chance the courts will be inclined to side with you for primary custody. But you have to show that you're not trying to manipulate her, that this is about what's best for her." I nodded, trying to focus. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for any of it. "The fact that your daughter isn't willing to go to her mother's, that's huge," Richard continued. "You need to document everything, especially if her mother's behavior has been inappropriate." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, like he knew it was a tough pill to swallow. I looked at the floor, not sure how to feel. I wasn't sure what was best for Sophie right now. The last thing I wanted was to turn her into some kind of pawn. When I left the office, I felt the weight of it all, custody battles, the upcoming hearing, Sophie's future, pressing down on me. But I couldn't avoid it. I had to protect her. At home, Sophie was sitting on the couch, her feet tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. Her face was blank, like she was trying to disappear into the screen. "You okay?" I asked, standing in the doorway of the living room. She didn't look up, but she shrugged. "Yeah." I sat next to her, letting the silence stretch between us. After a minute, Sophie sighed, setting the phone down and glancing at me. Dad, I don't want to go to Mom's anymore. I swallowed, trying not to let the hurt show. I know, kiddo. I know. She didn't seem to know where to start, so she just said it all in one breath. Mom's boyfriend. He touches her weird. I saw them, and she told me not to tell you or anyone. She said I'd mess everything up. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. What do you mean weird, Sophie? She looked down, her voice small. He kisses her, but not normal. Like, he's doing it in front of me and making it awkward. She looked at me then, her eyes searching my face. I didn't know what to do. My stomach turned. How had I not seen it? How had I not known? But I pushed that aside. This wasn't about me, this was about Sophie, and she was scared. You did the right thing telling me, I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. You don't have to keep secrets, Sophie. Not from me. She nodded, her eyes wide and sad. She said it was our secret, but I didn't want it to be. Good girl, I told her. And if you ever feel uncomfortable again, you come to me. Okay? She nodded again, then hesitated. Dad, I want to tell the judge. About the boyfriend and about Mom, what she said to me. I want them to know. I wasn't sure if that was a good idea. She was 12, and this wasn't a situation any kid should have to deal with. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore how much she needed to get this out. I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do, Sophie, I said, trying to sound gentle but firm. It's going to be tough, and I don't want you to be in a position where you feel like you have to take sides or say things that might hurt you. I don't care, she replied, her voice harder now. I need to tell the truth. I stared at her for a long moment. She looked so small, but there was a fierceness in her that I hadn't noticed before. Okay, I said after a beat. You tell the truth, but I'll be right there with you. Whatever happens, I've got your back. She didn't say anything, but the way she looked at me, I could see she was holding on to that promise. And I wasn't about to let her go through this alone. We sat there in silence for a while. Neither of us said much after that. But as I watched her, I realized how much I hated that she was caught in the middle of this mess. She deserved so much better than this. But it wasn't just about her mother anymore. It was about protecting her, no matter what. And if that meant going to court, I'd do it. I'd do anything to make sure she was okay. Dad, Sophie said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, kiddo? Do you think Mom's still gonna be my mom? I didn't have an answer for her, at least not one that wouldn't crush her. So I just took her hand and squeezed. We'll figure it out, I promise. And for the first time since all this started, I believed my own words. I was in the kitchen, washing the dishes. Something to do with my hands. Something to fill the space between me and the thoughts that kept circling my head. Sophie was upstairs, in her room, and I just started to feel like I was breathing again. That's when I heard the knock. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake, maybe the neighbor or a delivery. But then the knock came again, harder, sharper this time, and I froze. My heart started racing, and for a split second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. But no. I walked to the door, and there she was, Laura, standing there, eyes wide, hair messier than usual, like she hadn't even bothered to brush it before showing up at my doorstep. I'm here to see Sophie, she said, her voice tight like she had no intention of playing nice. I didn't even blink. No, you're not. What do you mean, no? She snapped, pushing past me as if it were her right to walk in. She's my daughter. I'm taking her with me. I stepped in front of the door before she could get any further. Not happening. Not like this, Laura. Her mouth twisted into a smirk, a fake calmness that barely covered the storm underneath. You're just trying to control everything. You've poisoned her against me, haven't you? She's just a kid, and you're using her to get back at me. I swallowed hard. This isn't about getting back at you. This is about Sophie, and she's not going anywhere with you until we get this settled in court. Her eyes narrowed. You're making her choose, you know that? You're turning her into a weapon. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not making her choose. You are. And you've been doing it for months. If you think I'm letting you take her after everything, you're wrong. We'll do this the right way or not at all. She crossed her arms, her jaw tight. You think you can control this? The judge is going to see right through your little game. You're not a saint here, you know? I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. The only game I'm playing is making sure Sophie is okay. And you need to stay out of her life until the custody hearing. Otherwise, you're only making this worse. She glared at me, but I didn't back down. Not this time. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with venom. We'll see what the court says. But don't think you're winning this. You're just pushing her away from me. You'll see. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Is that all? I asked, my patience wearing thin. She was quiet for a moment, just staring at me like she was trying to decide if she was going to throw something else at me. Then she scoffed, turning to leave. You'll regret this, she called over her shoulder. You don't know what you're doing. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As she slammed the door behind her, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, like a storm had just passed. But then I heard a soft voice behind me. Dad. I turned around to see Sophie standing in the doorway, her eyes wide, but she didn't move. She was quiet, watching me like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to speak. I walked over to her, crouching down so I was at her level. You okay? I asked, my voice softer now, as if to reassure her that nothing bad had happened. She nodded but didn't say anything. Don't worry about that, I said, brushing a piece of hair from her face. I'm not going to let her take you like that. We're doing this the right way, okay? Everything's going to be okay. Sophie looked at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with more than just sadness. I saw something else there too, a sort of quiet understanding. She wasn't going to argue, wasn't going to protest. She just stayed still, like she was letting it all settle. You really mean that, don't you? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. Of course I do. Sophie didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. I could see in her eyes that she knew what I was doing. She knew it wasn't just for me. It was for her. I stood up and led her back toward the kitchen. The room felt different now, like there was a space between us and all the crap Laura was trying to drag into our lives. We sat down at the table, and for the first time in days I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. Sophie didn't say anything else, but she didn't need to. I was the one who needed to be strong. And if I could hold it together, if I could make sure she didn't feel like she was drowning, maybe this would work out. I just had to keep holding on. The days felt like they were dragging, each one longer than the last, until the hearing was right on top of us. I'd always hated waiting, but this was different. Every minute felt like a countdown. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't feeling the pressure. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Sophie, about making sure she was protected, that we weren't walking into a situation where the judge could twist things around. Richard, the lawyer, had been clear. The judge will listen closely to Sophie. She's old enough to have her preferences considered. The court won't make her choose, but she's at an age where what she says matters. That sounded good in theory, but it didn't make the weight any easier to carry. I sat in the kitchen, going over the papers Richard had sent me, but my mind kept drifting. I kept thinking about Sophie and what she was going through. She wasn't saying much, but the silence was just as heavy as the words she wasn't speaking. Sophie, I called up to her. She came downstairs slowly, like she was trying to avoid whatever was coming. Her face was pale, like she hadn't been sleeping well, which made me worry even more. I've been thinking, I started, about the hearing. You know it's coming up, right? She nodded, sitting down at the table. Yeah. I pushed the papers aside, trying to focus on her. I know this is hard, but if you want to say something, if there's anything you want to make sure the judge hears, you can. You can tell them exactly how you feel. She didn't meet my eyes, her hands picking at a loose thread on her hoodie. I don't know what to say, she mumbled. I just don't want to go to her house anymore, Dad. Feels wrong. I know, kiddo. I know. But I want you to be sure. We don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. Sophie hesitated, then said, when I was at Mom's, her boyfriend, he would always make comments. Like, It's nice to have a little girl around. She swallowed hard, her voice catching for a second. It made me feel like I wasn't really supposed to be there, like I didn't fit in. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process that. He said that to you? She nodded, her eyes downcast. Yeah. And sometimes when they'd fight, I'd just sit in my room, but then I'd feel like he was standing outside my door, waiting for her to come get me. I could feel my blood start to heat, anger rising in me, but I held it in. She needed me calm right now, not someone else losing it. That's not okay, Sophie, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You know that, right? You never have to feel like you're not supposed to be somewhere. I don't like it, Dad, she said, barely audible now. I don't want to go back. I don't want her to make me feel like that again. I nodded, swallowing hard. You won't have to. I'll make sure of it. But whatever happens, you're in charge of what you say. You're the one who decides. She stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly, the tiniest flicker of relief crossing her face. That night, after she'd gone to bed, the first of many messages from Laura came through. She had a way of dragging me back into her world with just a few words. I can't believe you're doing this to me. This is all your fault. You've twisted her mind against me. You're destroying our family. My stomach twisted as I read it. I didn't even have the energy to argue with her. I forwarded it to Richard. He didn't need to know everything, but I wasn't about to ignore it. Not when she was making this personal. The next day, the texts didn't stop. She sent a dozen more, accusing me of everything from alienating Sophie to keeping her hostage in my house. The threats, the blame, it was all the same. I didn't respond. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Each message was a reminder of how deep she'd sunk into her own story, how willing she was to ignore what she'd done. Instead, I forwarded everything to Richard. She's escalating, I wrote. What do we do next? His reply was simple. Stay calm. Let her make her case in court. We'll use these messages as evidence. She's making it easy. Easy. I wasn't sure if it was easy, but it was clear that she wasn't about to make this process any smoother. A week later, as the hearing loomed closer, I found myself getting lost in the details. What would the judge ask? How would Sophie handle being in that room? Would she be able to say what she needed to say without breaking down? But all I could do was hold on to the one thing I knew for sure. I was doing the right thing. I wasn't going to let her go back into that house. Not with him there. Not with Laura pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I kept telling myself that. Every day. It was the only thing that helped me breathe. The courtroom felt cold, like everything inside had been stripped down to the bare essentials. The chairs, the benches, the dull gray walls. It all seemed so impersonal. Even the air smelled sterile, like it was waiting for something to happen. I sat at the table, feeling the weight of the moment, trying to keep it together. My lawyer, Richard, sat beside me, flipping through his notes, his face calm, but I could see the tightness around his eyes. The hearing was about to start. My heart was in my throat, and I tried to swallow it back down. The judge entered, and the room fell into a silence that felt like a punch to the gut. She was a woman, probably in her late 50s, and she had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that you'd expect from someone who'd spent years sifting through messy divorces and custody battles. She looked at us for a long moment, like she was sizing us up. "Let's begin," she said, and her voice left no room for argument. Laura's lawyer went first. I didn't know what he said, honestly. His words blurred together as he painted my ex as the victim, someone caught in a terrible situation, trying her best for her daughter. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was fuming. He said all the right things, but it felt hollow, like a performance. When it was my turn, I stood, trying to force my legs to move. Richard spoke first, outlining the facts. Sophie had been rejecting her mother, staying with me full-time, and had been clear about her discomfort with the boyfriend. The timeline of Laura's affair and the rapidity with which it all unfolded. Laura's relationship with the boyfriend, her moving him into the house, the lack of emotional support for Sophie, was all laid out. Then it was time for Sophie's testimony. They called her in for a private interview with the judge, and I was left sitting in the hallway, my palms slick with sweat, the silence stretching out. I tried to calm my mind, tried to focus on what was ahead, but my thoughts kept spiraling back to Sophie. Was she okay? Was she nervous? I hadn't wanted to push her, but I also knew she had to be heard. I couldn't be in that room with her. She needed to speak for herself. But still, I hated that she was going through this. It wasn't right. I heard the door creak open, and then I saw her, walking toward me with her head down, her eyes locked onto the floor. I stood up, trying to read her face, but I couldn't. "How'd it go?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "It was fine, Dad." I could see that she wasn't fine, but I didn't push. Not here. Not now. Richard joined us moments later, his usual calm demeanor a little more strained than usual. "She did well," he said. The judge was very attentive. She didn't let Laura's lawyer talk over her, didn't let them downplay Sophie's feelings. "Do you think it's going to be okay?" Richard gave me a long look, like he was measuring the weight of my question. "It's going to be tough." But Sophie's testimony was critical. The judge heard her, and she was clear about what happened. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. I kept thinking about Laura, how she was sitting on the other side of the room, probably doing everything she could to convince herself she wasn't the bad guy. When the judge returned, her face was neutral, but there was something about the way she held herself that made me brace for what came next. She cleared her throat and looked down at the papers in front of her. "I've reviewed the testimony and the evidence. It's clear that the environment in which Sophie has been placed is not conducive to her well-being. The allegations of inappropriate behavior, as well as the lack of emotional support for the child, are concerning." I felt my heart skip a beat. The judge looked at Laura, who was sitting stiffly across the room. "Ms. Hamilton," she said, her voice sharp, "the timeline of your relationship with Mr. Jacobs was not disclosed in an appropriate manner, and I find that troubling, particularly in light of the emotional distress it caused your daughter." Laura's face tightened, and I could almost see the words forming on her lips. But the judge didn't give her a chance to speak. "After reviewing all the evidence, including Sophie's testimony, I have come to a decision. Mr. Reese," she said, turning to me, "you will be awarded primary custody of your daughter. Ms. Hamilton will have supervised visits, pending a review after 6 months. In addition, child support will be set at the standard rate, effective immediately." I exhaled, the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over. The judge had ruled in my favor. I turned to look at Sophie, who was standing in the doorway, watching me with wide eyes. There was a faint glimmer of relief in her face, but it was almost like she was afraid to let herself feel it, like she wasn't sure if it was real. I walked over to her, kneeling down to be eye level. "We did it, kiddo. You're safe." Her lip trembled slightly, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded, and I could see the weight lifting from her shoulders, slowly, inch by inch. Laura stood up abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor, and stormed out of the room without a word. But she didn't need to say anything. The look on her face said it all. She wasn't going to let this go. But I didn't care. I focused on Sophie, who was standing there, her arms wrapped around herself like she was still unsure whether this was real. "We're okay, Sophie," I said again, softer this time. "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The moment the judge handed down her decision, everything shifted. The room felt suddenly colder, more real, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stood there, barely able to process what had just happened, but my focus was immediately on Sophie. She was still standing near the door, her eyes wide, her hands gripping the sleeves of her hoodie. She didn't smile, not at first. It was like she was waiting for something, some sign that this was real, that we weren't just in some kind of strange dream where everything could reverse at any second. I walked over to her, keeping my voice low, steady. "It's over, Sophie. You're safe now." Her lip quivered for just a second, and then she nodded. Slowly, carefully, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to feel relieved. She stepped forward, and I pulled her into a hug, letting her bury her face in my chest. I could feel her tense up for a moment, then relax, just slightly. I knew it wasn't over for her. Not really, not after everything she'd been through. But it was a step. From across the room, I could hear Laura breaking down. Her shoulders shook as she sat there, tears running down her face. It was the kind of breakdown that felt both like a performance and an honest reflection of the mess she'd made. I didn't feel sorry for her. I turned away, focusing on Sophie. "You okay, kiddo?" She nodded again but didn't say anything. There were no words, not yet. I wasn't going to rush her. As we started to walk out of the courtroom, I felt a presence behind me. A low voice, just loud enough for me to hear. "You think this is over, don't you?" I turned around, my stomach sinking when I saw him. Laura's boyfriend, Mr. Jacobs, standing just behind us. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists by his sides. "I'm not going to let you destroy our family," he spat, taking a step forward. His eyes locked on mine with that same aggression I'd seen before. I stepped between him and Sophie without even thinking. "Stay the hell away from my daughter," I said, my voice low but firm. He sneered, trying to push past me, but I held my ground. "You think you've won? You're nothing but a pawn in this, man. This is far from over." Before I could say another word, Richard, my lawyer, stepped in between us, his calm demeanor suddenly shifting into something sharper. "Mr. Jacobs," Richard said, his voice steady but with an edge. "You need to leave. Now." "Or what?" Jacobs challenged, but Richard didn't flinch. "Or I'll make sure your threats go on record, and you'll have a lot more to worry about than a custody hearing," Richard replied, pulling out his phone as if he were ready to make a call right then and there. Jacobs hesitated, sizing us up. The threat hung in the air for a long moment before he finally muttered a curse under his breath and stormed off. Sophie didn't watch him leave. She kept her eyes on the ground, her fingers still twisted around the fabric of her hoodie. I put my hand on her shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You're okay. You're safe." The drive home was quiet. Sophie stared out the window, her face pressed against the glass like she was watching the world move by but wasn't really part of it. I didn't press her to talk. Not yet. When we finally got home, I started making dinner, the noise of the kitchen filling the silence between us. Sophie sat at the table, picking at her phone, still distant. Finally, after a long while, she looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, was it wrong? To want her to pay for what she did?" I stopped what I was doing, wiping my hands on the towel. My heart broke for her. She was carrying around guilt that shouldn't even be hers to bear. "No, Sophie," I said softly, walking over to sit beside her. "It's not wrong to feel hurt. It's not wrong to be angry. But this situation, what's happening between your mom and me, it's not about making anyone pay. It's about making sure you're okay." She nodded slowly, but I could see the confusion still swirling in her eyes. "I feel like I shouldn't want that, but I do. I want her to understand what she did, that it wasn't just hurting you, it hurt me too." I pulled her into a hug, and this time, she didn't pull away. "I know, sweetheart, I know. But the truth is, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't ask for any of this. You did the right thing by telling the truth, and that's all we can do now. Just keep moving forward." She stayed quiet, but she hugged me back, and that was enough for now. Later that evening, as we settled into a quiet routine, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Laura wasn't going to let this go. There would be more fights, more struggles ahead. But for tonight, at least Sophie was here with me. She was safe. And for the first time in a long time, I finally felt like I could breathe. And that had to be enough. The morning of Sophie's first supervised visit with Laura, I could feel the tension in the air before she even spoke a word. I tried not to show it, but inside, I was a mess. I didn't want her to go. I didn't want to let her walk out that door and face a situation that wasn't even close to what it should have been. But I knew she had to. It was court-mandated, part of the process. "Dad!" Sophie's voice broke through my thoughts, and I looked up to see her standing by the door, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her expression was tight, like she was trying to hold everything in but couldn't quite manage it. "Yeah, kiddo?" She hesitated before she spoke again. "You sure I have to do this?" I didn't lie to her. "Yeah, but you don't have to be anything you're not. Just go see how it feels. You don't have to pretend everything's okay." She didn't answer right away, just stared at me with that look that made my heart ache. She wanted things to be different. I wanted them to be different, too. "I'll be here when you get back." "It's okay," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Sophie nodded, but it didn't feel like she believed me. An hour later, I was pacing the kitchen. The clock on the wall ticked louder than I remembered, each second dragging on like it was mocking me. My phone was on the counter, but I didn't check it. Didn't want to jinx anything. The door finally opened. Sophie stepped inside, her shoulders slumped and her face tired. The moment I saw her, my stomach dropped. "How was it?" I asked, even though I already knew it couldn't have gone well. She walked past me without answering, heading straight for the couch. I could tell she was holding it together, but just barely. "Awkward," she said, her voice quiet. She dropped her bag on the floor and sank into the cushions. "I don't know. I don't know what she wants from me." I sat beside her, my hand resting on the arm of the couch, close enough but not pushing for more than she was willing to give. "What do you mean?" She didn't act like she cared about, well, anything that happened. She kept asking if I was okay and then acting like it was no big deal, like everything was fine. Like she wanted me to just forget about everything and go back to how it was. Sophie rubbed her face, looking exhausted. "I don't think she gets it, Dad. She doesn't get how much she messed everything up." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words hitting me like a punch. "I know, kiddo." I didn't know what else to say. She was right. Laura was so focused on trying to get her life back, she wasn't seeing how much she'd broken in the process. "I didn't even feel like she wanted to fix it," Sophie went on, her voice growing a little stronger. "It was like she was just worried about getting back into my life, but not actually understanding why I don't want her there." I nodded slowly, my chest tight. "I'm sorry she put you in that position. It's not your fault, Sophie. You're allowed to take your time, to feel however you feel about her." She didn't respond, but I could see the quiet relief in her eyes, like she was hearing something she hadn't been able to let herself believe. She didn't have to fix this. Not for anyone. I stayed with her for a while, letting the silence settle, knowing she wasn't ready to talk about it anymore. But I could tell she was working through it, processing everything in her own way. Later that week, the first child support check came through. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter, staring at me, as if it were some kind of reminder that this whole thing was still real, that nothing had really settled, not yet. I didn't touch the check. I set it aside and didn't even give it a second thought. I'd been trying to figure out how to handle the money. It wasn't a small amount, but I didn't want to get used to it, didn't want it to become part of my life in a way that made things feel wrong. I knew what I had to do. I took the check, went to the bank, and set up a separate savings account for Sophie. It wasn't for us. It was for her, for whatever she wanted or needed in the future. Maybe for college. Maybe for some big adventure she hadn't even dreamed up yet. But it wasn't for us. Not for today. Not for anything else. It was just for Sophie, because she deserved something of her own in this mess. Something that didn't have strings attached. Something she could call her own when everything else felt out of control. When I came back, Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing. She didn't ask about the check, didn't seem to care. And maybe that was good, maybe it meant I was doing the right thing. I walked over to her, sitting down across from her, and watched her for a while. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't frowning either. "How's the drawing going?" I asked. She shrugged, not looking up. "Okay, I guess. Just trying to figure it all out." I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Take your time. You don't have to figure it all out right away." She nodded, but I could tell she was already sinking back into her thoughts. I gave her space. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. Things had settled a little in the weeks after the hearing, or at least I thought they had. Sophie was doing better, finding some balance in her life again. She'd started joining the local debate team, and I could see the spark coming back in her eyes. She was still guarded, still quiet at times, but the weight of everything was finally starting to lift off her shoulders. It was the small things, her getting excited about a speech competition, her actually laughing at something on TV, that made me believe we were moving in the right direction. But then, of course, Laura wasn't done with her drama. She started sending texts and emails again, mostly about how Sophie was adjusting. How is Sophie? Is she eating enough? Sleeping okay? I'm worried about her emotional state. She needs to know I'm still her mom. It wasn't just one message. It was a steady stream, filling up my phone, making it impossible to ignore. I didn't respond to every one. I wasn't interested in playing her game, but I couldn't ignore everything. I'd reply briefly, just enough to keep it civil. She's fine. She's adjusting. That was it. No long explanations, no details. I knew what she was trying to do. Control the narrative. Make me feel guilty for not letting her back in like nothing happened. A few days later, another email came through, this one longer, more forceful. Sophie is shutting me out. You can't continue to keep her from me. You're making this worse. She'll never forgive you if you do this to her. You're hurting her. It took everything in me to resist the urge to fire back something sharp, something that would hit her as hard as her words hit me. But I'd learned over the last few months that feeding into her anger was the last thing I should do. I didn't need to explain myself to her. Instead, I forwarded it to Richard. I knew what she was doing, trying to make me out as the villain, trying to get inside my head and manipulate the situation. Richard had advised me to keep everything documented. Just keep your distance, Richard had said. Let the court handle it. You don't owe her anything. But then, just when I thought I could breathe a little, there was a message from him. Laura's boyfriend, Mr. Jacobs, again. It was short, but it didn't pull any punches. You're tearing this family apart. You think you've won, but you're just making things worse. You'll regret this, believe me. I stared at the message for a long time, the familiar anger flaring up in my chest. But I wasn't about to let him get to me. I blocked his number again. Then, I forwarded the message to Richard with a quick note. We're doing this again. It didn't take long for Richard to respond. I'm sending a cease and desist letter. He's crossing a line. I didn't bother with the details. I just felt a flicker of satisfaction that it was finally being dealt with. Laura's circus act, with all its threats and accusations, was something I didn't have to engage in. Not anymore. By the time I put my phone down, Sophie had come downstairs, her debate team pamphlet clutched in her hand. She looked more like herself than she had in a long time, no longer hiding in her room, no longer shutting me out. You ready for the first meet? I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Yeah, I'm nervous, though. What if I mess up? I smiled back, walking over and ruffling her hair. You won't. You've been practicing. You've got this. She seemed to appreciate the reassurance but didn't linger on it. She was ready for something bigger now, something that didn't involve the past. She was ready to take control of her future, and that was more than I could have hoped for after everything she'd been through. The doorbell rang then, and I glanced at Sophie, raising an eyebrow. You expecting someone? She shook her head. Nope, maybe it's just the mailman. But when I opened the door, I wasn't expecting the person standing there. It was my mother-in-law, her face tight with the same intensity I'd seen when Laura was still in the picture. I wasn't sure what she wanted, but I wasn't in the mood for another confrontation. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice firm. I stood there for a second, not sure how to react. But before I could say anything, Sophie walked up behind me, her expression guarded but steady. Grandma, you can talk to Dad, she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the doorway. I saw my mother-in-law's jaw tighten, but she didn't try to push past me. Sophie's presence seemed to settle something in the air, like a silent declaration that this wasn't going to be a fight. Not today. You should go home, Mom, I said, my voice calm, firm. This isn't the time. Sophie didn't wait for her grandmother to respond. She turned, heading toward the stairs. I've got a meeting to get to. Later, Grandma. Her grandmother stood there for a moment, then let out a frustrated sigh before turning and walking away. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Sophie had spoken, and for the first time in a while, It felt like we were starting to carve out a space where the noise from the outside didn't get to us anymore. The next few weeks were quieter. Sophie kept focusing on her debate team, and I kept focusing on making sure she had what she needed. I didn't let the child support money slip into our daily life, didn't let it distract me from what mattered. Sophie was doing better, I was doing better, and I finally felt like I was keeping things steady. Nothing was perfect, but it was a hell of a lot better than it had been. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. The weeks after the hearing settled into a rhythm that felt new but familiar. Sophie was back in school, her grades improving little by little. Her teachers told me she was more engaged in class, asking questions, participating more than she had before. She'd even joined the school's debate team, and it felt like I was watching her step into herself again, finding pieces of who she was before everything turned upside down. She still had her quiet moments, still spent hours in her room some days, but it was different now. There was a sense of peace in the air, like we were finally carving out a space that was ours, without the noise of the past hanging over us. One evening, after dinner, Sophie turned to me as I was cleaning up the dishes. She had a look on her face like she was gathering her thoughts. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked. I dried my hands and sat down across from her, giving her all the space she needed. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She hesitated for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her glass. Then she looked up at me, her eyes soft but steady. I want to say thank you." I blinked, surprised. "For what, sweetheart?" "For believing in me. For letting me decide what was best for me." She paused, her gaze dropping for a second. "I know it wasn't easy for you, but you didn't make me go back to Mom when I wasn't ready. You didn't force me to do anything I didn't want to do." I didn't know what to say at first. I just sat there, feeling a lump in my throat that I couldn't shake. My whole world had been wrapped up in protecting her, and to hear her say that, like she saw it, like she appreciated it, made everything feel worth it. "You don't have to thank me for that," I finally said, my voice a little rougher than I meant. "You're my daughter. I'm always going to do what's best for you. I'm just glad you're okay." She smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes for the first time in a long while. "I am, Dad. I really am." The next day, Sophie went to her grandmother's house. It was the first time since the ruling that Laura's side of the family had asked to talk to her. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew they'd been kept in the dark about a lot of things. They'd been distant ever since the divorce, but this time, they wanted the truth. I took a deep breath before I answered their call. "It's not pretty," I told them. "I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Laura made some decisions and they hurt Sophie. They hurt both of us." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "We just want to know what happened," Laura's mom said, her voice tight. "I know," I said, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "But you've got to understand something. It's not just about what happened. It's about how Sophie feels now. About the emotional damage that was done." They stayed quiet, but I could tell they didn't know how to process it. I didn't blame them. No one ever does when they hear the truth about someone they love. They'll always be your family, but right now Sophie needs space, I finished. "She's healing, but it's going to take time." They didn't argue with me. They just said they understood, and that was that. The conversation left me unsettled, but not surprised. I didn't expect them to take sides, but I knew it wasn't easy to hear the reality. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Sophie's well-being came first. That was all that mattered. Later that week, my parents called. They didn't need to ask questions, they just offered support. They knew what was going on. They'd been there for every moment, every step of the way. It was different with my side of the family. They didn't judge, they didn't need explanations. They just said, "We're here for you, whatever you need." And that meant the world to me. As I sat down that night to watch a movie with Sophie, the usual heaviness of the situation finally started to lift. I knew the future was still uncertain. There were still going to be days when things didn't feel right, when Sophie felt the weight of everything. But for now, for this moment, we were okay. And no matter what came next, I knew one thing for sure. I would always have her back, no matter what.